and we'll just wait 1 minute for any latecomers. But as soon as 7 o'clock hits, boom, we're on.
All righty.
Okay. It wasn't K.
Okay.
How many have you got on the call?
There's 9.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, Christina Frank is here.
Good. Welcome.
Okay.
Christina.
Yes. Okay. So Anne, I'm going to mute you. You're noisy.
Yeah. Yeah. Good idea.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to Discovering Solutions for Fairs and Exhibitions in BC. It's obviously brought to you by BC Fairs, and I'm your facilitator tonight, Chrissy Thompson. Tonight we have a special guest. Some of you might have seen her as a familiar face from BC Fairs convention, Allison Markin. And her company is All She Wrote Consulting. So Allison, do you want to give a little bit about who you are, your background, how you kind of came about? Oh, wait, before we do that, the topic of today is the key of why we're all here. So it's marketing your fair and exhibition in a digital world. And so Allison is going to share who she is, but she's also going to enlighten us that it's not a scary world. So go ahead, Allison.
It's not really scary.
No.
It's scarier than it used to be, but we're going to talk about how to use the right tools and amplify them and be effective and we'll talk a little bit as well about time management and why you don't need to be on every network on the planet. My background is, before I started All She Wrote, apparently 11 years ago, according to LinkedIn, because I don't keep track. I worked in public relations and media relations in the post-secondary sector. So I worked at UVic, BCIT, and UBC, and was at BCIT and was actually recruited by the city of Penticton, where I am, to come and be their arts and cultural officer. In fact, today is the anniversary of when my job was cut. Thank you, Facebook Memories, for that. So I picked up from Vancouver, I moved here and had a background in arts and culture and education. And within 5 months and 3 weeks, so 1 week shy of being able to get a nice severance package, my position was cut. And I had come to Penticton, bought a house, got some cats, settled in, and had to make the decision, do I jump ship? Do I go back to Vancouver? What do I do? And I always tell people that All She Wrote started with a single tweet, and that tweet was, "Will work for wine." And at that point, I built up a lot of not a lot compared to now, but I had a number of followers on Twitter. Instagram didn't exist at the time. Facebook was just getting into sort of key markets with pages and groups. And I had people then tweeting me saying, "What can you do? We've seen that you're doing things. Can you help us set up our social media?" And off I went. So most of my work now is, about half of it is digital marketing. And that's kind of at the basic level of, here's what Facebook is. Let's build you a page. Let's see if you need Twitter. Twitter is kind of falling by the wayside now these days. You do need Instagram. Do you need any other networks? And a lot of what I do is also managing digital advertising, because if any of you have ever looked at advertising on Facebook, the platform and all of the options you can use are massive. And it's not just advertising within Facebook, it's using Facebook to then push out ads to other places, and doing things like, those of you who've ever shopped on Wayfair or Mark's Work Warehouse, you go and look for, extreme cat litter boxes, and then suddenly all the ads you see are for cat toys and different things. And those are different ways where you can target people to say, hey, we know that you have cats. Here's 20 things you might want to buy for them. Click point, here's my PayPal account, and off you go. And a lot of what I do as well now is also consulting for businesses and business planning, because it's kind of, social media has become such a big part of running a business, big, small, medium-sized, and it's a big part of what I do. So I often have people come to me and say, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I have a Facebook account. how can I make it more effective? Do I need to have a page? How much is advertising cost? So I sit down and go through a process of auditing what they have online already, coming up with a series of recommendations, fixing things, training people, and then I in theory, I train people and I say, go off into the world and market your business, and I will monitor them and make sure they're not doing anything silly. And whenever anything breaks, I'm the first person who usually gets the text or the phone call of, why is Instagram not working today? Well, it's not working today because Donald Trump tweeted something and crashed the network. Mm-hmm. And that's usually stuff that happens.
I just want to add too that anybody who was part of Buy BC, that was the campaign that BC Fairs did last year. Well, Buy BC did the campaign. That was Allison working with BC Fairs last year and creating content and really powerful information for all of us. So just to give you a face behind Instagram and Facebook, this is who she is.
So I spent a lot of time last year. There were 15 fairs in the program. I think I got to 9 or 8. It was a lot. I lost track. Mm-hmm. Lots of pictures of giant pumpkins to the point where my friends but it's the kind of stuff that now people are asking me. It's April and they're like, oh, are you going back on the road this year? I don't know just yet what's going on. Janine and I have another, we've had many conversations and we're sort of waiting for the government to say, okay, let's do this. But it may or may not come. But I also post things for BC Fairs, and you will see if there's Instagram posts usually or Facebook, it's usually me who's picking those things up, and then I will share them to my own networks as well. And so that's, if you have pictures, I'm happy to have you send them to me so I can post things in different places and share stuff and keep those networks going, because we did have a lot of really good traction by the end of that program, and I really don't want to see it go to waste.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about traction within and just explaining what that means and just how the momentum kind of gets going in that. But I do want to jump right in and I just want to remind everybody, at any time, if you have a question for Allison and you would like to speak, there is a raise your hand button if everybody sees it. I don't know if it's visible to everybody, but there is a raise your hand, or just unmute yourself and we'll carry on, or put it in the chat, question in the chat, and because I think it's really important that everybody is heard on this webinar, just the same as Allison presenting, and then she'll basically be able to tell and dive into things that are relevant to people in this room. Okay, so Allison, do you want to we have Allison and I have questions that we've kind of come up with that we think is relevant, and so we'll kind of go through this list. And I know that there's certain steps, Allison, that you have in a marketing plan, and you have something to share with us for that, correct?
Yes, so I have something. A lot of people use PowerPoint. I actually use something called Prezi. And if you've seen me at some of the BC Fairs conferences, you may have seen parts of this presentation. So I'm going to switch to that in just a second. Depending on your browser and speed, this may bounce around a little bit for you. Don't worry about taking notes, because it's actually something that's online and we can send a link straight to it so you can scroll through it at your leisure. Perfect.
I'll actually make a note of that because I'll add it into the recording of this to everybody. So thank you for that.
So if it does bounce around a little bit, I apologize. It just depends on what speed you have wherever you are compared to what I have. So I'm going to just switch over to this. There we go.
I'm just going to mute myself out.
Okay. All right. I hope everybody can see that okay. Should say digital marketing in 5 steps in the middle of your screen with a little bit of graphic stuff around it. And if no one puts their hand up or knocks on their screen, I'm going to go with it's right there. But again, if you miss something, you'll get this link and it's got all of the 5 steps and a few other things in it. So don't worry too much. The idea behind social media these days now is you create content, you then share it in the appropriate places for your audience, and hopefully you then amplify that content. And amplification can be anything from using social media influencers, and I really hate that term, but that's just what it is. So influencers, people in your community, chambers of commerce, volunteer organizations that might be able to share your message for you, and that involves things like tagging or working with your local newspapers and radio and having them share information on your behalf. So we want to create information, share it on your networks, and hope that you can then it'll then amplify itself online. If not, then this happens to me frequently where people will message me or they will send me, they'll tag me and say, hey, can you share this for me? And you all have those connections and people on your board, staff members, volunteers who can do that for you. So create, share, amplify is what I work with most of my clients now. There we go. And a couple of things, there's a few different terms that people use, and I always like to define what these three things are. There's social networks. Those are the technical tools, the websites, the apps, all of the technical stuff we use to post things. Social media, I define that as the content that we choose to share. So it's the actual meat and the media that you're going to post. And then social media marketing is the marriage of networks and media to create conversations online and IRL, as the kids say, in real life. So we want to choose the right tools, we want to have the right content, and then build in a marketing plan that doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be every morning you think, oh my God, I didn't post anything yesterday. What am I going to post today? But having meaningful conversations that then drive people to decide, all right, I want to go to this event. I wanted to experience this. Point, click, buy my tickets, and off we go. And we'll talk a little bit about online ticketing later in the evening and how we close the loop on sales with those kinds of things. And the important thing is to have a plan. And I do have a lovely little template, which I may send to Chrissy as well, which can go out as a PDF. But you'll have all of these 5 steps in front of you to read whenever you wish. So the basics, and we'll go into each of these 5 steps in detail in a moment. Defining some objectives. What is it that you want to do? What are you lacking at your fair? Is your objective to get more people coming, to get more sponsors, to get more volunteers? Do you have multiple objectives? Creating the content. And that doesn't mean that you have to be focused every day on, I have my phone, I got to take pictures, I have to take video. But what content do you have on hand? Are there links that you can share? Are there photographers that have come in the past that might be able to share photos and other ideas for content? Selecting the tools. We'll focus mostly on Facebook and Instagram. Twitter is, if you have a Twitter account, don't delete it, keep it, because then you've got a username. But Twitter has become much more of a news feed for information. Where you're going to get more bang for your buck is the interaction on Facebook and on Instagram these days. And if anybody's using Snapchat, great. I hate it. I am way too old for Snapchat. But it is effective in certain markets if you're using it or you have somebody who is really into it. But when it comes to marketing to a sort of a general, vast audience, it's not particularly effective. Pinterest used to be a big thing, and then slowly it started to kind of fade off. When I sort of judge things in 2 ways. When I see television shows saying, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Snapchat, if it's a television show or somebody who's big and they sort of think, yes, you want to follow me on Snapchat, then maybe it's time to have a look. When my mom says, okay, Allison, I need to be on Snapchat. Show me how. I know that network has, as they say in the TV business, jumped the shark. So that means that once it's reached my mom, it's reached sort of peak saturation. And that's when the majority of people are going to start looking at it and thinking, hey, I might need to actually get on here. You want to launch the networks if you don't have any built just yet, or relaunch them or rebrand them if they've been stagnant for a while or they've been managed, for example, by a volunteer and they've gone off to do something else. promote where you are. So that is as simple as having things on business cards and on letterhead to say we're on Facebook and Instagram. Don't forget to follow us. And then managing and measuring, which we'll get into. So managing the content and measuring the effectiveness of it. I hope that most people who have websites do things like have Google Analytics, if you're getting really technical, so you can see where the traffic is coming in, where it's going out, and what's being effective. If you don't, that's okay, but it's when it comes down to social media, marketing without data is like trying to drive a car without gasoline. So you can build it and do beautiful things, but if no one's paying attention and you're not sure if people are clicking through or making purchases, then it's kind of like having your door open at a store and you're not sure who's coming in and what they're doing. So having
Can I ask you something on that?
Yep.
So a lot of fairs that, and even, I mean, for our fair, I mean, I'm PR and marketing for Alberni District Fall Fair, so it's, I'm very much in the know on the apps, the platforms that we use. But is it not, if fairs just chose at this point in 2019 to use Facebook, Instagram, and or Twitter, if like the rest of it realistically is for a different generation, but they are still using it to chat, to snap, and to promote our fairs without us even knowing it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And if someone is, the challenge with a few of them is there are so many different levels of privacy that I could go to one of your fairs. I may have a number of different sort of emerging networks. I may post it and have a very specific group of people on a certain network, but they may not be the ones that you want to target. It's sort of my circle of my tribe, as some people will say, who would be interested in what I'm doing, but will they take the next step to actually go and book their vacation or make plans to go? That's the question. Is I wouldn't worry too much about people who are doing live Instagrams or live Snapchat, excuse me, or things like that, because it is not reaching sort of the general target market that's out there in the world. Does that answer your question, kinda?
Yeah, I'm just, because I was just, sometimes when all platforms are put in front, it gets confusing as to which one would be best. And just from my knowledge and my research, Instagram and Facebook have been top notch for all ages, especially Facebook for all ages. It's still kind of number one.
It's number one for data and for targeting and advertising. Someone who is, let's say, 16 years old, they look at Facebook as, I kind of have to do it so my parents can see that I'm okay. And they don't really use it for interacting all that much, but it's like, I'm going to date myself here. It's like when email became a big thing. It was like, oh, we all have to get on there, and now it's almost fading out a little bit because there are other ways to communicate.
Right.
And it's sort of the power horse and the basic level of communication. Mm-hmm. So it's Facebook is good. Facebook is actually, may have even reached this point where we search so much on Facebook that Facebook searches are actually beginning to outnumber Google searches for certain things. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have a Facebook page, if you think about it, if you're looking for a restaurant to go to, the first thing you probably do is go online and see if you can find it. If that restaurant hasn't updated their website or they haven't claimed their Google Place page, which would list business hours and parking information, the next thing you probably do is go to Facebook to see, well, is their Facebook page up to date? And will that give me a menu or their opening hours? So that's kind of the cycle that we're going through now. So Facebook is, it's, even if you hate it, and many people do, and it's going to change and it's constantly changing, you still kind of have to be there just to have that basic information out. Instagram is good because it's visual, it's fast, it's easy. There certainly are lots of bells and whistles that are coming with it, but it is that second level that kind of where the average Facebook user is typically these days a woman in her early 50s That's sort of the bell curve. Instagram skews much younger than that.
Right. Yeah, because there's also the fact where Facebook, you can actually do events where you can put the events and people will like your events, and then it gives it automatic reminders, almost like a drip system within email, but it's within Facebook. So that's one thing that they're improving on immensely.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll go through a few things, and if anybody has any very technical questions, don't be offended if I say let's do that, let's talk about that offline, because if it's usually easier for me one-on-one to say, okay, here, let's fix this for you, let's show you this, because once you start going down the rabbit hole of, oh, I can figure out how to do this, then suddenly we're 20 minutes into, hey, I didn't know that I could do this on Facebook or Instagram. So, and I'm happy to follow up with anybody who's got a specific question about something that may be bothering you or broken.
I'll put in your contact information in the email as well, Allison.
Yeah. So the plan, step one, plans are always good to have objectives. And in this case, again, don't overthink these things and try to come up with 5, 10, 20 pages of here's what we're going to do. Nobody has time for that. I don't have time for it. I do very short plans for my clients now that are executable and not 20 pages of philosophy of, well, we need to target this person and that person and these colors will work. Keep it simple. So what are your business goals? And this can be something you can come back to every year, every 3 to 5 years, and look at, our business goal was to increase attendance by this much %. Or our business goal is we want to increase ticket sales online by this much. Or we want to do something specific. We're adding a new event within the fair. We want to make sure that sells out. Social media goals, often people will look at those as, well, we want to get to 100 fans, 1,000 fans, 10,000 followers, whatever your goal may be. What I would like to get people thinking about is, instead of, okay, I need more followers, let's get 10,000 people following us on Instagram. Sure, set that as a goal, but those, I call them vanity metrics. And I have a client in Alberta who doesn't care really about data, how many people are clicking through his website. He just is like, oh my gosh, we have 600,000 Instagram followers. That's what gets him excited. But how many of them are actually engaging with him and with his product? Very low. He's just sort of like, yeah, we have all these beautiful pictures and videos. And so don't get caught up in the vanity metrics of like, oh, we have 1,000 followers now, we have 1,000 likes. Look at the data that's coming in on Facebook, and if you have a Facebook page, you look at the insights and see what are your demographics, how many people are engaging, are more people liking our posts, sharing our posts, clicking yes, I'm going to attend this event. So try not to get caught up in the I'm so popular kind of thing, like, oh, I have 1 million followers and look at me, but look at the actual data that's coming in that is easy to find on Facebook. And if you have a business account on Instagram, you can see some of that as well. And think about your targets. So what kind of people are you targeting to come to your fair or your event, your exhibition? Are you targeting, do you need to target people who always come? Do you need to give them some sort of advertising message or make sure they're aware? Or are you going to target a different demographic this year? So let's say a number of you want to target people under the age of 30. Well, then if that's your goal this year, then we need to make sure you're keeping your Facebook page nice and healthy, but you probably need to be more active on Instagram to get into that demographic. So think about who you're targeting and where you need to find them online. And that also comes down to, do we need to pay for advertising in local newspapers, on radio? Is there a digital newspaper here in the Okanagan? Castanet is the biggest one, and they sell a ton of online advertising. They don't make a paper, but if anything happens here, if there's lightning strike, there's a fire, first place people go to is Castanet. So look for those types of areas as well where you can share content. That's step one. Step two is getting to the meat of things, so the actual content. And you may be surprised once you start thinking about it of what kind of content do you already have on hand. So do you have pictures that people have taken? Have you had a photographer come around? Did you walk around with your phone last year and take pictures? Do you have historical pictures or historical videos or previous years may have had media coming and doing television stories, and you can still link to those. And what content is missing? And there's so much out there now. If you try to every day think, I have to post a link, I have to post a picture, I have to post this, think about what is more effective and what you have on hand. And don't just decide, okay, well, we don't have a picture of a show barn, for example. We need to go and get one. Think of it a little bit organically so you don't stress yourself out with like, oh my gosh, what I'm going to talk about today. Use things that are online already, interesting little bits and pieces of video. And the IP, for example, their theme this year is horsing around, so I'll be looking after some things for them. There's lots of fun horse videos that I can just share, and people love it. And there's a wonderful one I'm going to post at some point this week of a horse having its hair blown in the wind, and sort of like it's like a shampoo commercial. So these kinds of things that are out there already, just to use what is appropriate, and that you don't have to keep reinventing the wheel.
I'll just add to that, Allison, because there's I have this thing, it's a tool that I use, it's 50 social media content ideas, and it literally is similar to what you said, but it kind of goes through like in categories. And I'll print this off, but I'll put your head, like if you have a logo or something, I'll throw that on there for you, and then put it in as well, because I actually use this every single day, or every time I use, just like, okay, what haven't I posted, and put it on there, because sometimes you can get lost in the mix of it. And it's really like, it's just get personal about the history of fair, ask questions, take polls. Would you rather, just different questions, trending topics that are happening, favorite things that fair members like doing, or things that other people have said. So I'll do that for everybody.
Through the Buy BC campaign last year, the stuff that I posted, whether it was on the BC Fairs networks or sometimes on my own, the content that got the most engagement, food. So if there's a signature dish at your fair, and no matter what it is, or every year at the IPE, I go to see the guy who has pierogi poutine. And he sees me coming, and I usually go and have that for breakfast one day during the week, which is why I also need to go to the gym a lot. But it's these things where you ask questions. What's your favorite ride? What's your favorite fair food? What's your favorite 4-H exhibit? And all of these things, and to get people talking. So how are you going to create content? If you have volunteers who can do video for you, can do pictures, if you have media partners, and we'll talk a little bit about sponsorship towards the end of the session. Again, there's so much out there that you can use, but think about what you don't have. So do you need a new logo this year? Do you need little bits and pieces of video? And ponder, who do you have on your team as a volunteer, or on your board, or as a staff person, who can be sort of assigned to create some of that content. And again, don't think that, oh gosh, what am I going to do? And there's, again, so much out there that you can use and you can search for, and you can share from there. Share your other fairs in your region as well. So if they've posted an event, say, hey, our neighbors are having their event, and we'd love to see you at ours as well. So it's good to have all of that content going back and forth. Step 3, so choosing the right tools. And I'm going to assume that, I'm going to hope that just about every fair has a Facebook page. And if they don't, that they're going to consider creating one. And that's a page for business. So there are different levels of things on Facebook. There's your personal profile. So I am Allison M. Markin. The M is there. Normally I would say don't put your middle initial on anything on social media. Mine is there because my cousin has an ex-wife with the same name as me, and she has bad credit. And she has no middle name. So at one point I was getting mixed up and getting a lot of messages from her creditors. So I just kept having to say, wrong Allison Markin, wrong Allison Markin. My personal account is Allison M. Markin. I have a business page that's called All She Wrote, or All She Wrote Consulting. And there are groups on Facebook, and Facebook is now changing the way they're going to run things. So groups are probably going to be a little more useful. I haven't quite bought into using groups for marketing just yet, because it's not particularly easy to share information outside of the group. And at the moment, unless your Facebook has upgraded itself in the last little while, the personal account, so Allison M. Markin, can interact in a group, but my business page can't. That has just changed, and I can see in my own Facebook account that I can now interact as Allison or as All She Wrote in some groups, but it's kind of that last barrier on Facebook of, well, everybody is in a group having a nice little party, and suddenly Walmart walks in and starts talking to you. And that's kind of the mentality that's happening. So I'm still sort of like, let's see what happens with groups coming up. Groups are great if you have volunteer groups, sponsor groups, and you want to give them some sort of extra benefit, or you have a VIP group and you can, someone they come and they buy VIP tickets, give them access to a specific group so they get extra information. What are your targets using? So I'll give you a few stats particularly on Facebook and Instagram. So Facebook, as I mentioned, the sort of median user these days is a woman in her early 50s. And that's just the way Facebook has kind of changed over the 15 years Facebook has been in existence, 15 or 16. And that's just the way it's skewing. It's become we started to see this shift years ago where it became a spot where your mom wants to go and connect with you, grandma wants to see what the grandkids are up to, and you can create those personal connections. So that's where Facebook kind of is. But everybody, just like email and maybe even fax machines back in the day, everybody seems to have a Facebook account. It may not be active, and there's more stuff being done now on what are called sort of the quiet, hidden Facebook users. So I may post something on my personal account, for example, maybe have 3 comments, 10 likes, or something like that. But then what actually happens is many more people see my content. They just don't interact with it because they don't want their own information connected to me, or it's something they've noticed or they've seen, but they don't feel like they need to be part of the conversation. So those sort of hidden users are kind of emerging as the next kind of target of all of these people who, yes, they're following you and watching what you do, but they just don't comment or like anything. They just know, they've got the knowledge of, yes, this event is happening. Instagram, again, skewing a bit younger. Instagram in different countries, here comes one of my cats. Instagram is a bit different in a few different countries. For Canada, it tends to be sort of that 25 to 35-year-old person, both male and female. It's kind of split 50-50 from the last blog post I read about what's going on. And you can see in your insights on Instagram what kind of followers you have. There's a cat coming to shut my computer down, probably. And Snapchat, again, much, much younger. Twitter is all over the place. Now, there used to be more data about Twitter. That's Elton behind me. Twitter used to have more stats available, but because Twitter, the way that it's built, I could go on Twitter and pretend I'm a 92-year-old man today and no one would know the difference. So it's hard to kind of tell what the demographics are. And Twitter, again, has become much more of a news feed than anything else. So back in the day, Twitter used to be a nice little party. You would get online and you would have Twitter chats and have little parties happening, but it doesn't happen very much anymore except for very specific things. In the wine industry, there's a lot of Twitter chats that happen, but they're very much geared towards wine geeks, wine writers, people who have a vested interest in very specific information. And what is sustainable? So I always tell people after I give a seminar, don't run out of the room and think I have to be on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Pinterest, everything else. But what is actually sustainable for you as a board, as a volunteer organization, or with minimal staff? What can you actually manage to do? If it's only Facebook, then stick with Facebook if that's what you can keep up to date. And if it's Facebook and Instagram, great. If you have somebody who their entire job is social media, build some more for them, and that's fine. But again, think about how much data you have, how much time you have to dedicate to this kind of stuff. Do you need to also build in time for advertising, for data, and having different information? Oh, excuse me. So what's sustainable? And then monitoring your reputation. Most of this now is, I just sucked in a cat hair, I'm sorry. This is a pretty girl sitting next to me here. So are you monitoring your reputation? And if you have the reviews turned on your Facebook page, that's where you monitor your reputation. Respond to comments, good or bad, just so people will know that there's actually somebody paying attention to what's being said about you. And there's also Google Place pages or Google Pages. And if you Google your fair and you see something come up, if no one has claimed the business page or a business page, that's one of the most important things you can now do is go and make sure you've claimed your Google page. And that way you can respond to reviews. You can tell people what your hours are. You can make sure the information and the pictures are up to date, as opposed to just like, oh, it may say that your fair is closed or that it's not happening this year. And that's information that you need to make sure that you're managing and staying on top of, because we use search engines, particularly Google, so much now for everything that if you're not making sure that's up to date, I'm going to get wrong information in a heartbeat. So it's very easy to do. You just, literally just Google yourself, see what comes up, see if there's a little link that says, do you own this business? Click there and follow the steps to claim that page. Step 4, launching and promoting. So I'm going to hope that everybody's got at least some sort of social media presence, whether that's Facebook or Instagram or both or something else. Make sure that it is on things like signage. It is promoted with your sponsors so they know they can tag you and vice versa. Have you got it on business cards? Do you tell people, don't forget to follow us on Instagram? Here's the hashtag that we like to use, for example. But make sure it's not just about we've built it online, we've got a Facebook page, we've built it, and now everybody will come and find us. But it is having that basic level of don't forget to follow us on Facebook, don't forget to follow us on Instagram. And if you feel like you need to do advertising, there are so many different ways to do advertising to give everything just a little bit of a boost. And so think about that, and if you need to promote it, or do you need to run a contest or something like that to increase the engagement and have more promotion of your networks. And step 5, management. So who's your leader? And there should be 2 people who sort of look after things, or one. There should always be, especially in this day and age where there can be so much negative stuff posted and incorrect information, who is the leader who makes sort of the executive decision of somebody is abusing our Facebook page or they've posted incorrect stuff? Who's making the decision on staff or as a board member to decide this is how we're going to respond? There's been some sort of a crisis situation, the ticketing link isn't working or something like that. So who is the leader who makes the decisions? That does not need to be the same person as the person who actually does the posting. So that can be somebody else who's in charge of posting, updating, keeping things going. But ideally you would have someone who is the decision maker and somebody or a team of people who look after keeping the content up to date. Again, if it's just you and you have to make those decisions, that's good. But there's always got to be somebody who, if something goes wrong, you've got somebody who you can go to and say, okay, well, this is not working. Are we making decisions? Are we spending money on advertising? What are we doing? So you have your leader, and then you have the person or people who are posting, and then are you measuring their results? So on Facebook, very easy to click on insights on a Facebook page for business. and see all of the data that Facebook is spitting out, and it changes almost on a weekly basis these days as privacy and Russian collusion and all these fun things are being addressed. On Instagram, again, if you have an Instagram account for business, which means you have to have a Facebook page for business because the two are linked, you can also see some of those insights. And again, with Google Analytics, if you have that, you want to see who's coming into your website, how long are they staying, what links are they looking for, are they clicking through from Facebook to your website or your website back to Facebook, for example, and are you measuring those results and how effective they are?
That's awesome. So we're sitting at 20 minutes left. So before we get on to some of the topics that we've chosen for tonight, we might not get to all of them, but is there any questions that have come up through Allison's presentation that anybody is interested in asking her? No? Okay. So like I said, if it comes up, we'll just kind of go. And I know it seems at times, I know that Allison, you work with people that sometimes feel overwhelmed with a lot of this stuff, but what can you give the fairs ideas on dealing with the websites and maybe just how important it is to have a website? Because was it you that told me that there's fairs out there in BC that don't have websites?
Yep. There are a handful that don't have websites, or if they do, they're so old and out of date that there's really no point in looking at them. And my guess is that a lot of them probably had a volunteer or somebody who built something years ago and kind of abandoned it, or they lost the passwords and no one can access it now, and there's no succession plan for who's going to look after these things once that person is gone. The reason why, and I still have people saying, well, there's Facebook, there's Instagram, why do I need a website? You need a website, and I'm getting tagged on Facebook as I speak, actually. When Facebook blows up, or it breaks, as it did a few weeks ago, and no one could be on Facebook or Instagram, or a scandal comes up, or there's a data breach and nobody wants to be on these networks, your website is what I call your home base. So you still have control over that website. You can manage the content. So when we're all done with social media, and I wouldn't be surprised if the user base is kind of shrinking on Facebook, but we're all probably going to get tired of this stuff at some point. Your website is this thing that you can manage yourself. And you can use things like set up an email database, but if everything else just kind of explodes and we're all done with social media, you need to have that home base. And the website as well is important to have. You don't have to have a big website, and I've seen some that have 15, 20, 30 pages. A typical website these days, 5 different sections: home, about, events, sponsors, contact, and you're done. And you want to have that call to action. So if I'm trying to contact you, there's at least a form to fill out. But the most important thing is probably for ticket sales online. And if you can do those things on platforms like Eventbrite and other ticket sales things, but I want to be able to go to your website, see when the event is happening, click here, buy my ticket. If I end up going, great. If I don't, you've still got my money. And that's part of closing the loop. But websites, if you feel like that's it, no one wants to be on social media, take a step back and at least have a website, even if it's one page, as long as it's got up-to-date information. And it's critical these days because nobody reads paper.
And I want to say too, as much as you don't want to take a person out of the loop, but it also takes when you do online ticket sales, it actually frees up somebody else to do something else. You don't need so many because it's already prepaid. I mean, you'll still need gate staff, yes, but you'll eliminate the lineups. And Christina Frank actually spoke about this on our very first one about just basically diversifying how we create the opportunity and the VIP sales or VIP tickets to be able to have people have an experience. And everybody, everywhere, I mean, how many here do online shopping? And so imagine people purchasing, and how many times have you bought something and then didn't go? And so that is what could happen at the same time. Not that we want people to come to the fair, but it's still that opportunity to be able to reach more people and know the numbers that are coming through the gates prior to.
Exactly. And there's something in the gift card or couponing world called breakage. And
What is
breakage
it?
is
Breakage?
called breakage. Yeah. And breakage is, I'll give you an example. Every now and then I go and buy gift certificates for my parents for restaurants here in Penticton or Kelowna. And probably 50% of the time they end up not being used. They can't expire anymore, thankfully, in Canada, but they sit on a fridge until somebody finally is like, oh, I guess we got to go and use this. But breakage is when I've put forward my money, I've paid my $50 for a gift certificate, I gave it to somebody and they never use it. And that restaurant still has my money, and it's called breakage because they've got my money. They haven't had to lay out anything. They haven't had to cook for my parents because they just didn't go. And it's the same thing with online ticket sales for fairs or events. I do this all the time for wine events where I will go and book a ticket because I know the event will sell out and I want to make sure I have my spot. But if I can't go, I usually will give my ticket to somebody else. But if I haven't, well, they've still got my money. And that's breakage as well, where, too bad for me, I spent my money and I just didn't go. And there's more and more studies, and in particular, one that I refer back to, again, it's the wine industry in Europe that talks about online tastings. And it's a good example of if I want to go to a winery and I want to book a higher end tour or a sit down tasting, particularly in Europe, and this is starting to happen more in North America, particularly in parts of the United States, where up to 82% of people who go and look for that kind of an experience online will purchase. And it's just click, point, here's my credit card, here's PayPal, and you're done. But if it's, I don't like calling people to say, hey, can you take my credit card and book me a space? If it's online, and this is particularly important for people sort of in that 55 and under range, where we want to go, here's the information, click, got my ticket, spit it out on the printer, or put it on an app on my phone, and you're done. So having that loop closed is done and done. Maybe I won't go. Maybe the weather's going to be bad, but you've still got my money.
So what if because sometimes you get people on fair boards that, we've always done it this way, what's not broken doesn't need fixing and stuff like that. So I know that when you and I talked beforehand, you talked about the experience that you had with one of the fairs. Do you want to share that one? Do you know what I'm on about? The IPE?
Yeah.
I think it was.
So the IPE for years, and I was shocked that they didn't do online ticketing until I think 3 years ago now. And for the amount of people who come through that gate,
what's the fair total on that one?
I think it's almost 150,000 in a good year over the 5 days. So it's more than 100,000 people who come through that gate. They buy tickets for not just entry fees, but ride passes and bracelets and barn dance and other different rodeo. And the amount of manpower that I sort of looked at of how much effort it takes to have somebody or however many people in the office processing tickets and printing them, you can even think about the environmental impact was huge. And when we launched their online ticketing, I think it would be 2 or 3 fairs ago, the amount of people who clicked through and the data that was coming in was phenomenal. And yes, you still have to answer questions, and I still have to be online and sort of say, here's when the gates are open, here's when the last entry can come in. But it makes it so much easier and so much faster for people as a guest experience. They've got their tickets in hand. They walk up, scan, and go instead of having to line up, get their tickets, then get in another lineup and actually enter the fair. So it made a huge difference in terms of manpower and freeing up some people, as you mentioned, but also just having an increase in general ticket sales. And some of the sort of events within the event sold better because If you think about shopping carts online, you would go online and you would click, yes, I want my entry, I want my family pass, but I also want 2 tickets to the barn dance on Saturday night and maybe 2 tickets to the rodeo on Sunday, and you book it all at the same time. Here's my credit card, and off you go.
So was there pushback from fair members about it?
Not really, and I was kind of surprised, but I think it was just a timing of, okay, we need to redo the website, and their website had been kind of static for a number of years, and it was just the next step, and let's do this. And it doesn't mean you have to build a custom ticketing link or an app, but using something like Eventbrite, and yes, Eventbrite does take some percentage off of the top of sales, but I have an Eventbrite account. If I see things that pop up, it's again sort of click and here's my credit card, and off I go. So you can use those platforms instead of having to build anything really fancy yourself.
Right. Awesome. So I know that we touched base on the social media platform when we were there. And just before we go on to the last bit of succession planning and some partnership stuff, is there any questions on what Allison spoke to you about so far? We're still golden. Okay. So digital succession, you want to explain, because you were talking about digital succession planning. You want to touch base on that?
The number of times that I have, and in fact it happened today, the number of times I have somebody calling me and saying, okay, we had an employee, we had a volunteer, they set up Instagram, we don't know what the password is, we can't reset it, we don't know what email address it's going to. It's becoming much more of an issue where if you have created, if somebody has come along and created an account on behalf of your business, whether it's a fair, exhibition, whatever, and you don't have control over who has access to that, there's a couple of things that can happen. One is someone who's got control and has built up a network can mess up your business. And a colleague of mine here in Penticton, he fired an employee, forgot to take him off of Facebook, and this employee didn't delete his Facebook page for his business, but deleted every single post for the last 5 years, so the page was blank. So there does need to be a plan of who's got access to things. If they're leaving, their volunteer term is done, or they're not going to participate. Have you taken away their access? Have you changed passwords? But the other thing, the most important thing I find, particularly with smaller organizations and volunteer organizations, is someone with a great heart comes along and says, well, we've got to have a Twitter account, we've got to have this. They create it, they use their own email address, they leave, and then nobody can access anything. So what I actually suggest to people is, if you are going to do that, create a Gmail account specifically for social media, call it social media, IPE, or anything like that, and then use that one specific Gmail account or Yahoo account for all of your social media. And make sure somebody who's on staff or who's been around and is planning on being around for a while has access to it. So then you can set things up when that person is gone. You have access to a Gmail account where you can go in and do the whole password reset. It goes to one specific email that somebody in the organization has access to, and you can secure everything. And there's a winery here, and I counseled them a few years ago. Their winemaker built up a huge following on Instagram, and he decided to leave for another winery. And because he set up that Instagram account, all he had to do was change the name of the Instagram account, and his 5,000 or so followers left the winery he was working at, and they all of a sudden were taken over to another winery because he had access to that brand. So it's making sure that you have at least a checklist in place of, if somebody leaves, who's going to look after things, who's got access, what do we need to change, and how are we going to make sure things are secure.
Yeah, that's a good point. Absolutely. So what else, Allison? Just in closing, coming up.
Partners and sponsors. And I know this has been talked about at the conference, I think pretty much every year that I've gone. One of the things that is really effective if you are looking for sponsors, partners, media partners, is having some of the data from your social networks to say, here's our following, here's how many people like our page, follow us on Instagram, use our hashtag if you are using hashtags, to be able to provide that, to potential partners and sponsors to say, here's how active we are, and then ask them, how can we work together? Do we like each other? Do we link cross-post?
Yeah.
What can you do uniquely online to get the word out across multiple networks? And it's not just about, okay, we've got 1,000 Instagram followers, but also we've got 1,000 Instagram followers. Here is the demographic of them. So if your Instagram followers for some reason are skewing towards guys who are 28 years old, maybe you go and approach a car dealership and say, we know 28-year-old guys like to buy Camaros. So maybe we work together and we create a partnership where we're cross-promoting. So having that information it's readily available. It's not hard to get, to put together, and it doesn't have to be complicated, but just bullet points of, here's our following, here are our networks, here's how often we post, and here's how our data is working, and use that as part of a sponsorship package.
That actually even, what came to me in that is you can even use that with your home show individuals, like coming up to partner with them, because of course you want people to go to the home show so people go back so they get a great experience, and vice versa. You want them to support and bring their following into your fair. So it could be for food vendors, it could be for anybody really. So that's actually, that I like that. I like that a lot. That's good. Allison, do you want to type your email into just the chat, so if anybody wants to jot it down? And if anybody has any questions, now is a good time to ask them, or Allison is available, I'm assuming, to answer emails or have a chat with anybody and any fair that is looking for some details, as she said. Is there any questions at all? Lisa, you have a question, or are you just reaching for your, no? Other Lisa 1, Lisa 2? Okay. So thank you so much, Allison. That was a lot of information. I know that sometimes we get overwhelmed with the social media and thinking it has to be done a right way. I just say create action. Just start. Start somewhere. Start with one platform. You don't need to do them all. And it can just literally, to start with either, well, definitely a website, but website and Facebook. And then if you're brave, go to Instagram, because then you can link your 2 accounts and it's beautiful. It's a one post deal. So next month is May 14th. We are doing our session, and we will have a guest on from Volunteer BC. And so if anybody has questions, please email them to me. I will put my email address in the chat, because the people that will be coming on, or the person that will be coming online, it'll give them time to prep, because I do have some questions before, but I think it's really powerful to have some questions as well. So is there any questions prior to leaving? Allison, is there anything in closing that you'd like to say?
Just don't be afraid. I know people are, because you just hear so many horror stories about things online. What you guys do as fairs and exhibitions and in agriculture is extremely important, because without agriculture, we don't eat, we don't drink, and it is, sure, you'll have complaints from people, and I deal with this all the time of this is too expensive, and you should be doing this and subsidizing this, and it is more about responding to those kinds of criticisms and showing that you're part of the community and you're paying attention. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be everybody is happy and it's a kumbaya kind of moment. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you get, the easier it is to just sort of become sort of like, oh, okay, no, we can post this, we can share this. The rule of thumb I used to have when I first started teaching social media was, if you can't say it to your grandma, don't post it online, and you'll be okay.
True enough. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Allison, for your time tonight. And thank you, everybody, for your time, for showing up. And we will see you in a month's time. Okay. Good night.